Welcome to Thriving Thursday. So, part two in our series about the corrupt self-publishing industry this month. Today, we're going to talk about the author ripoff map and a little bit about each of the places where this all goes and how it works together. And we're going to dive into a little bit about the first element of who's taking part of your profits. So I mentioned last week that this industry has really become a money-sucking plot. Back at the beginning when I started my company, I came from traditional publishing and I realized that this industry was already doing that, but it has gotten progressively worse along the way. And now it's to the point where it doesn't really serve the authors at all. There's so much markup, there's a monopoly on the distributorship end, and it's really getting ugly out there and time to look for new solutions. So here's the roadmap of how this all works. We hire a self-publishing company, and if you're someone who's gone through Amazon, this is CreateSpace. And even with CreateSpace, there is a certain amount of, actually there's a lot of corrupt practices going on that are pushing out other self-publishers. And this is really a detrimental thing because Amazon products have absolutely no opportunity to go into bookstores. The bookstores will not take them because the distribution point is so low, the percentage for the company. So typically this goes into the self-publishing company, then the finished product is sent off to a POD printer. The POD printer lists it on Amazon when it is ordered by the consumer. Amazon puts the order back into the POD printer. The POD printer sends that product out to the consumer in an Amazon box. So you can see there that there's a little round table right here where surprisingly the POD printer does a lot of the work. So I'm imagining that there's a little different cut from Amazon back to the POD printer. Now, part of this process as well, what happens is the author completely loses visibility of who has his book. So there's no interaction between the author and the consumer. What that means is that automatically the consumer becomes Amazon's client and not yours. And people have tried several different ways to get around that over the years. One of the best ways is to really juice up your author profile so that people can actually find you. So none of this really serves the author because when all is said and done, most of the time the author gets about $1.50 to $2 out of the book, when really these guys have walked away with the rest of the retail pricing on this. So let's talk a little bit about self-publishing companies. Self-publishing companies are usually the gateway to what you're sold, and that's because this is a company that's speaking to your hopes and dreams. Now, let me rephrase that in a way that most self-publishing companies sell. When they sell to your hopes and dreams, they're selling to your ego. And many of us have gotten in trouble because we let our ego take over and believe that we have the best book ever and believe that the self-publishing company is going to make us a superstar by selling us lots of marketing. The reality is that most of these self-publishing companies sell marketing. They market to their audience, and their audience is not your audience. Let me define that. Your audience, if you're, let's say, a self-help author, is people who are looking for self-help. If the self-publishing company is marketing your product, they're marketing it to people who want to write books and publish books. They may pick up a few people here and there, but for the most part, the marketing that they do does not serve you. This is where the hard sell comes in, the Cinderella, the rag to riches scam. We're going to make you a superstar because your book is fabulous, and all you have to do is buy a bunch of that promotion that I just mentioned. Promotion, for the most part, does not work for books. It's platform building, and platform building starts way before the book is ever published. So here's what they do. Here's what most self-publishing companies do. They format your manuscripts into a book format. They design the covers. They get the copyrights and ISBN purchased for you. and then they upload the manuscript and the cover to the POD printer, which there is a fee for that. So don't believe that that's all done for free. All of this requires labor, and they should charge for it, absolutely. Here's what else they do. They do your royalty calculations. So they take the price of the book, the distribution fee, and the retail price, and all of that is calculated into what actually goes in your pocket. Now, there's a lot of stuff along the way that they're taking that they really shouldn't be taking, other than the fact that you agreed to it. They also sell marketing and promotions, which for the most part are worthless. Their target audience that they promote to is not your target audience, and they're not one bit interested in cultivating your target audience for you. They also send out the royalty payments to you. And let me define this as well. They're in some ways, they're like the bank. They bring your money in, and then they hold it for a couple days and gain interest or invest it or whatever they do. They actually hold those payments for quite a while. Most of them pay on a quarterly basis, and they get their money from Amazon or the POD printer monthly. So here's the scam. The first where it starts is the book markup. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, because this is very important to your royalty schedule. Royalties are calculated by taking the retail price of the book minus the actual printing cost of the book minus the distribution fees paid. And that's what's left over. What most self-publishing companies do is they mark up that book. So let's say it costs $2.15 to print it. They charge you $4.30. So right away, they're skimming off of your profits and making a profit for every book you sell. They sell you worthless promo. I've talked about that a couple times now. I actually had a client back several years ago who published a book through Ex Libris. And she sold about 12 copies outside of her family. And they called her and said that someone in Hollywood was interested in making a movie from her book. And for $20,000, they could create a screenplay and sell it to Hollywood. Now, when I went back to her and talked to her about, well, how many people really bought your book? It was 12. What are the odds? You have to sell a lot of books to have Hollywood interested in, and they don't call your self-publishing company and say, hey, we'd like to do this. They know that published authors retain their own rights to the book. So that was a huge scam. And add to it that she was an 86-year-old woman, they probably could have been prosecuted. Distribution that doesn't serve the author. So what does that mean? So the distribution that's on Amazon currently used to be that you could list the book for less than the traditional publishers gave them. The traditional publishing percentage is 52% of retail, is what traditional publishers give distributors. That's why they end up in bookstores. That's why they end up in different venues. That's why when you actually do a book signing at a bookstore, they're happy to have you, because they're already getting a good cut of every book you just sold. However, in the monopoly that has become Amazon, Amazon is now wanting those sort of percentages from self-published authors as well. And that's just crazy, because it'll never end up in a bookstore. And it's literally, there's no work done by Amazon other than having it on their site. And they charge, here's the scam with self-publishers too, they charge for every little thing. When I published my first book through a company I will not mention, they took my manuscript and they did some sort of auto convert on it. And in the auto convert, all of my apostrophes turned around the wrong way. And they came back to me and wanted an extra $300 to go in and manually change them. It was crazy, because I looked at my manuscript and my apostrophes were apostrophes. So it's little things like that where they'll play gotcha with your product, and it can add up to thousands of dollars in changes. So from there, it goes to the print on demand house, which we're going to talk about in more detail next week. and how they actually add into this process. So once all of that is done by the self-publisher, then it is uploaded into the print-on-demand house's system. If you're using CreateSpace, that's CreateSpace. If you're using normal self-publishing companies, it's a number of other different companies that they can go through. And that is the middleman really the middleman on that? So here's the roadmap again. We just covered the self-publishing company's roles. But again, we're going to go over the POD printer and the distributor over the next couple weeks. But as you can see, as we move along, it doesn't really serve you. So we're going to talk about the distributor as well as we go along. And exactly why all of this system is failing. And it's because there is greed at every corner of the marketplace. So if you're not fully building out your funnel, and you must for a book launch, you're leaking clients and revenue. See you next week.